Have you ever witnessed truth being dismissed, only to watch it rise like a phoenix from the ashes of mockery? Today's narrative plunges into the raw power of faith colliding with political ambition, where an elderly believer's words, first scorned and rejected, become the very catalyst that transforms a nation's heart. This is a story about humility breaking pride, about divine timing trumping human calculation, and about how God often uses the least likely vessels to deliver his most powerful messages. The morning mist hung over the city square like a veil between heaven and earth. Samuel Whitmore adjusted his worn black vest, his 73-year-old fingers trembling not from age, but from the weight of what God had placed on his heart. For 40 days, he had prayed about this moment. For 40 nights, he had wrestled with doubt, but now, standing in the shadow of the courthouse columns, he knew his time had come. Senator William Hartfield emerged from his campaign vehicle, his navy blue suit crisp as ambition itself. At 47, he commanded attention with every gesture, every calculated smile. His security detail formed a protective diamond around him as he moved toward the podium where 200 supporters waited. The latest polls showed him 12 points ahead. Victory seemed inevitable. Samuel stepped forward from the crowd. His weathered hands clutched a small leather journal, its pages yellowed with age and prayer. "Senator Hartfield," he called out, his voice carrying a strange authority despite its gentle tone. "May I have just 1 minute of your time?" The security team moved to intercept, but Hartfield raised his hand. Something about the old man's eyes, perhaps their clarity, perhaps their sorrow, made him pause. 60 seconds, he said, checking his Rolex. "Make it count." Samuel opened his journal to a page marked with a faded ribbon. "3 nights ago, I had a dream. In it, I saw you standing at a crossroads. One path led to power built on sand. The other led to service built on stone. The Lord wanted me to tell you—" "The Lord?" Hartfield's laugh cut through the morning air like a blade. "Sir, I respect your faith, but I deal in reality, not dreams. Security, please escort this gentleman." "Your father died when you were 7, Samuel said quietly. The senator froze. "You promised him on his deathbed that you would make something of yourself, that you would matter. But, William, you've confused being important with being good." The color drained from Hartfield's face. No one knew about that promise. Not his wife, not his campaign manager, no one. "How could you possibly? The same God you've spent 20 years running from sent me here today." Samuel's voice remained gentle, almost fatherly. "Pride comes before a fall, Senator, and your fall is coming. But it doesn't have to destroy you. It can rebuild you." Hartfield's jaw clenched. The crowd had fallen silent, phones raised, recording everything. "You're done here," he said coldly. "Marcus, get him out of my sight." As security led Samuel away, the old man called back, "Remember my words when the storm comes, William. Remember that mercy was offered before justice arrived." The senator turned to his crowd, forcing his campaign smile back into place. "Well, folks, that's democracy for you. Everyone gets a voice, even the delusional." The crowd laughed nervously. "Now, let's talk about real change, not fairy tales." But Rebecca Chen, a junior reporter from Channel 7, had captured everything on her phone. Something about the old man's certainty, the senator's momentary fear. It nagged at her. She uploaded the video to her personal social media that evening with a simple caption. "Strange encounter at Hartfield rally today. This old man seemed to know something." The video got 12 views that first night. Rebecca almost deleted it. Almost. 3 days later, the news broke. Federal agents raided Senator Hartfield's offices at dawn. The charges: embezzlement, bribery, and conspiracy to defraud the government. $15 million skimmed from disaster relief funds. Emails surfaced showing Hartfield mocking the very people he claimed to serve, calling them useful sheep and necessary idiots. Rebecca's video exploded. 1 million views in 6 hours. 5 million by sunset. The old man's words, "Pride comes before a fall," became a trending hashtag. News stations scrambled to find Samuel Whitmore, but he had vanished like morning mist. In his penthouse apartment, Hartfield watched his world crumble on 7 different news channels. His wife had taken their children to her mother's house. His phone buzzed with messages from lawyers, each more expensive and less optimistic than the last. And on every screen, that old man's face, those knowing eyes, that terrible gentleness. He poured himself a scotch with shaking hands. The amber liquid reminded him of his father's medicine bottles all those years ago. He could still smell the hospital disinfectant, still feel his 7-year-old hands gripping the bed rails as his father whispered, "Make me proud, Billy. Be somebody. Be somebody." He laughed bitterly. He had become somebody, all right. Somebody headed to federal prison. His phone rang. Unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Senator Hartfield." The voice was familiar, warm despite everything. "This is Samuel Whitmore." Hartfield's grip tightened on the phone. "Come to gloat, old man. Your God must be having a good laugh." "No, son. I called to tell you that this isn't the end. It's a beginning, if you'll let it be." "Beginning?" Hartfield's voice cracked. "My life is over. Everything I built, everything I worked for, everything you stole," Samuel corrected gently. "Everything you achieved through deception. But William, your real life, the one God intended for you that can start right now, tonight, in your brokenness. I don't believe in your God. That's all right. He believes in you. He believed in you enough to send an old fool to warn you, to offer you a way back." Hartfield sank into his leather chair. Outside, protesters had gathered, their chants rising like a tide. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you help me after I humiliated you? Because 46 years ago, I stood where you stand now. Different crimes, same pride, same fall. And an old woman named Ruth Morrison visited me in jail. She told me that God's mercy is bigger than our mistakes. She was right." The senator was quiet for a long moment, then, "They're coming to arrest me tomorrow morning. I know. I'm scared. I know that too. Fear is the beginning of wisdom, William. Do you still have that Bible your father gave you?" Hartfield's breath caught. "How do you? Never mind. Yes, it's in a box somewhere. Find it tonight. Read Psalm 51. And William, when they come tomorrow, go with dignity. Confess fully. Hold nothing back. The truth will hurt, but lies will destroy you. Will you?" Hartfield paused, unable to believe he was asking this. "Will you visit me? In prison? Every week if you'll have me." After they hung up, Hartfield found the Bible in a box marked Dad's Things. The leather cover was cracked, the pages brittle. His father's handwriting filled the margins, prayers for a son he would never see grow up. Prayers for wisdom, for courage, for faith. He turned to Psalm 51. "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love." The words blurred as tears came, 40 years of unshed grief breaking free. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in downtown stood like a monument to justice, its columns reaching toward heaven. The same square where Samuel had first confronted Senator Hartfield now overflowed with media crews and curious citizens. Day 12 of the trial had arrived, sentencing day. Samuel sat in the third row, his journal open on his lap. He had filled 17 pages with prayers for William Hartfield, prayers for mercy, for transformation, for redemption. The old man's consistent presence had become a story in itself. The media called him the prophet of the plaza, though Samuel disliked the nickname. He was just a messenger, nothing more. Rebecca Chen sat 2 rows behind him, her press credentials hanging from her neck. She had won 3 journalism awards for her coverage of the Hartfield scandal, but something deeper had changed in her. Watching Samuel's faithful prison visits, witnessing the gradual transformation in Hartfield's demeanor, it had stirred questions she couldn't dismiss. The side door opened. William Hartfield entered in an orange jumpsuit, his wrists shackled, but something was different. Gone was the manufactured confidence, the calculated charm. In its place stood something rawer, more real. His eyes found Samuel's, and he nodded slightly, a student acknowledging his teacher. Judge Patricia Thornton, known for her stern sentences, reviewed her notes. "Mr. Hartfield, before I pronounce sentence, you have the right to speak. Do you wish to make a statement?" Hartfield stood. "Yes, Your Honor." He turned to face the gallery, his voice steady but humble. "6 months ago, an old man tried to warn me. I mocked him. I dismissed him as a religious fanatic. I was wrong. About him. About everything." He paused, gathering himself. "I stole from programs designed to help hurricane victims. I took money meant for people who had lost everything. I justified it by telling myself I deserved it, that I had earned it through my intelligence and cunning. But I was just a thief with an expensive suit." His voice broke slightly. "To the people I hurt, I am deeply sorry. I cannot undo what I've done, but I can promise this. Every day of my sentence, I will work to become the man my father hoped I would be. The man God created me to be." He looked directly at Samuel, to Samuel Whitmore, who showed me grace when I deserved judgment, who visited me weekly when everyone else abandoned me. "Thank you. You taught me that falling isn't the end if you learn how to kneel." Judge Thornton's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Hartfield, the court has received over 300 letters regarding your case. Most demand maximum punishment. But 12 letters speak of a changed man, a prisoner who has started teaching literacy to other inmates, who has donated his remaining legal assets to hurricane relief. These letters all mention the influence of one Samuel Whitmore." She continued, "The law demands justice, and justice you shall receive, but the court also recognizes genuine remorse and the possibility of redemption. I sentence you to 7 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole in 4 years conditional on continued community service and restitution payments." The courtroom erupted in mixed reactions. Some shouted that it wasn't enough. Others whispered about mercy. Samuel closed his eyes and whispered a prayer of gratitude. As they led Hartfield away, he stopped near Samuel's row. "Will you still come, even for 7 years?" Samuel stood, his aged hand reaching out to grip Hartfield's shoulder. "I'll come until one of us goes home to glory, son." Rebecca caught it all on camera, the moment when condemned and comforter stood as equals, both broken, both healing. 2 years later, the prison chapel smelled of industrial disinfectant and hope. 43 inmates sat in metal folding chairs, their attention fixed on the man at the makeshift pulpit. William Hartfield, now federal inmate number 47391, taught from a worn Bible, his father's Bible, the margins now filled with his own notes alongside the faded ink of the past. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the authority of hard-won wisdom, "I used to believe power meant controlling others. But real power is controlling yourself. Real power is choosing forgiveness when revenge feels justified. Real power is admitting you're weak and finding strength in something greater than yourself." Deshaun Williams, doing 15 years for armed robbery, raised his hand. "But Hartfield, you had everything, man. Money, influence, respect. How you end up here teaching us about God?" Williams smiled, the expression genuine in a way his political smiles never were. "I ended up here the same way you did, Deshaun. I thought I was God of my own universe. Turns out that's a pretty small universe, and it collapses quick." The men laughed, the sound echoing off concrete walls. These Thursday night sessions had started with 4 attendees. Now they regularly drew 40, sometimes 50. Guards had noticed the change too. Fewer fights in cell block C, more inmates enrolling in education programs, a shift in the very atmosphere of the place. After the session, William returned to his cell to find a letter waiting. The handwriting was immediately familiar, Samuel's careful script, slightly shakier than 2 years ago, but still clear. "Dear William, my doctor says my heart is wearing out. 75 years is a good run, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. But I wanted you to know something before I go. That day in the plaza wasn't the first time I saw you. 3 months earlier, I was praying in the park when God showed me your face in a vision. He told me you would fall, but that your falling would lift up many. I didn't understand then. I do now. Your teaching in that prison has reached men I could never reach. Your story has touched hearts mine never could. You see, William, God doesn't just redeem us from something. He redeems us for something. You're living your purpose now, perhaps for the first time. I'm attaching a photo Rebecca Chen sent me. It's from your last chapel service. Look at those men's faces, William. Look at the hope you've given them. That's your father's legacy now. That's your legacy. Until we meet again, either here or there, Samuel P.S. Check the news tonight. God isn't done with your story yet. William carefully unfolded the photo. It showed him at the pulpit, Bible raised, surrounded by inmates leaning forward, hungry for hope. He didn't recognize the man in the picture at first. This person looked peaceful, purposeful, free despite the bars. That evening, the prison television broadcast breaking news. Rebecca Chen, now a senior correspondent, stood in the familiar plaza. Tonight, a remarkable development in a story we've followed for 2 years. The Whitmore Foundation, established by 93-year-old philanthropist Ruth Morrison in honor of Samuel Whitmore's prison ministry work, has announced a revolutionary program. The screen showed architectural renderings of a building. The Second Chance Center will provide transitional housing, job training, and spiritual counseling for released inmates. The program's first director, William Hartfield, who will assume the position upon his release in 2 years. William stared at the screen. Ruth Morrison appeared, her voice strong despite her age. 46 years ago, I visited a young man named Samuel Whitmore in prison. He had embezzled money from my late husband's company. Instead of pressing for maximum charges, I chose mercy. That young man became one of the greatest forces for redemption I've ever known. Before he passed last week, Samuel asked me to extend the same mercy to William Hartfield. How could I refuse? The room spun. Samuel was gone. William gripped the cell bars, his knees threatening to buckle. His mentor, his spiritual father, gone without a final goodbye. But wait, his cellmate Rodriguez said, pointing at the screen. She said he passed last week. How'd you get a letter from him today? William looked at the postmark. It was dated 6 days ago, the day after Samuel's death. His hands trembled as he reread the letter, understanding dawning. Samuel had written it knowing he was about to die, had arranged for it to be delivered after his passing. Even in death, the old prophet was teaching him about faith, about hope, about perfect timing. The image haunted William's dreams that night, not a nightmare, but a memory that had transformed into vision. He stood again in that plaza, Senator Hartfield in his navy suit, all arrogance and ambition, but this time he could see what he had been blind to before. Samuel's eyes held no judgment, only love. The old man's weathered hands, extended in warning, were also extended in welcome. The black vest he wore was not the garment of a beggar, but the uniform of a servant. In the dream, Samuel spoke words he hadn't said that day. God loves you exactly as you are, William, but he loves you too much to leave you that way. William woke to find his cellmate Rodriguez kneeling beside his own bunk, praying. Rodriguez, you all right? The tattooed man looked up, tears streaming down his face. That story you told tonight about the old man who warned you? Hartfield, I need that. Whatever you found, I need it too. William climbed down from his bunk, his father's Bible in hand. Then let's find it together, brother. 1 year later, election night. The television in the prison common room flickered with election coverage. The incumbent governor had won re-election by the narrowest margin in state history, 51% to 49%. But the real story, according to the pundits, was the unprecedented voter turnout in urban districts, particularly among formerly incarcerated citizens. This is remarkable, the analyst said, adjusting his glasses. Exit polls show that 73% of eligible voters with criminal records cast ballots this year. When asked why, many cited the viral video from 3 years ago, the confrontation between then-Senator Hatfield and Samuel Whitmore. They said it inspired them to believe in second chances, in redemption, in the possibility of change. The screen showed that familiar footage again. Samuel in his black vest and cap, his white beard catching the morning light as he faced down a senator. But now, 3 years later, people saw it differently. They saw David confronting Goliath. They saw truth confronting power. They saw love confronting pride. Rebecca Chen appeared on screen, now hosting her own investigative program. The Whitmore effect, as sociologists are calling it, has led to criminal justice reform bills in 12 states. Prison ministries report a 400% increase in volunteers, and William Hatfield's prison Bible study has been replicated in 37 facilities nationwide. She paused, her expression thoughtful. I was there that day in the plaza. I thought I was witnessing a sad old man embarrassing himself. I was actually witnessing the first domino in a cascade that would reshape our entire conversation about justice, mercy, and redemption. Samuel Whitmore died believing his message had been heard. He was right. In his cell, William led his Thursday night group in prayer. The circle had grown to include guards now, off-duty, sitting among the inmates as equals before God. Officer Thompson, who had once taken pleasure in making Hatfield's life difficult, now brought his own Bible, its pages increasingly worn from use. Lord, William prayed, his voice steady and sure, we thank you for Samuel Whitmore, for his courage, his faithfulness, his love. We thank you for using a rejected word to start a revolution of grace. Help us to be worthy of the second chances we've been given. Help us to extend to others the mercy we've received. And Lord, when our time comes to stand in the plaza and speak truth to power, give us the strength to stand firm, even if we stand alone. Amen. 43 voices responded, their unity echoing through concrete and steel, reaching toward heaven. 6 months later, the day of release. 4 years had passed since the plaza confrontation. The morning of William Hatfield's release dawned grey and uncertain, fitting for a man stepping from one world into another. He stood at the prison gates, a cardboard box containing his few possessions in his arms. His father's Bible sat on top, its leather cover now held together with tape, its pages soft as cloth from daily reading. Rebecca Chen waited outside, her camera crew respectfully distant. Beside her stood an elderly woman, her back straight despite her 94 years. Ruth Morrison had insisted on coming, despite her doctor's protests. Mr. Hatfield, she said, her voice carrying the authority of age and wisdom, Samuel Whitmore visited you for 2 years before his passing. He saw in you what I now see, a man broken and rebuilt, a vessel emptied of pride and filled with purpose. The Second Chance Center awaits your leadership. William set down his box and took her weathered hands in his. Ma'am, I'm a convicted felon. I stole millions. I destroyed trust. Why would you? Because, she interrupted, her eyes twinkling with something between mischief and holiness, God has always specialized in using broken things. Cracked pots hold light better than perfect ones. The cracks are where the light gets out. A van pulled up, its side emblazoned with Second Chance Center and a simple logo, a phoenix rising from ashes, a cross in its heart. The driver emerged, and William's breath caught. Deshaun Williams, released 6 months early for good behavior, stood grinning in a maintenance uniform. Thought you could start this party without me, preacher. Deshaun laughed, using the nickname the inmates had given William. Man, I've been preparing that building for you. Wait until you see the chapel. We copied your setup from Block C exactly. Figured if it worked in prison, it'll work on the outside. A D. As they drove toward the center, Rebecca conducted her final interview for what would become an award-winning documentary. William, that day in the plaza, when Samuel confronted you, Did you really have no idea what was coming? William gazed out the window at the city passing by, so familiar yet so strange after 4 years. I knew everything, Rebecca. I knew how to manipulate, how to deceive, how to win. But I didn't know the only thing that mattered, how to be truly human. Samuel knew I was a criminal before the FBI did, but more importantly, he knew I was a child of God before I did. Do you regret that day? The humiliation? Regret? William turned to face the camera directly. That humiliation was my salvation. I had built my life on pride, and pride is just fear wearing a 3-piece suit. Samuel stripped that suit away, left me naked before God and man. It was terrifying, it was necessary, it was love. The van pulled up to the Second Chance Center. A crowd had gathered. Former inmates, their families, volunteers, reporters, curious neighbors. Above the entrance hung a banner, "Welcome home, Director Hartfield." But it was the smaller sign beside the door that made William stop and weep. The Samuel Whitmore Memorial Chapel, where truth meets grace. Inside the chapel, 43 chairs were arranged in a familiar circle. On the pulpit sat a worn black vest, carefully preserved under glass, Samuel's vest from that day in the plaza. A small placard read, "The armor of a servant is humility. The weapon of a prophet is love." Ruth Morrison placed a hand on William's shoulder. "Samuel's final request was that you wear this when you preach." She handed him a simple black cap, identical to the one Samuel had worn. "He said you'd understand when you were ready." William held the cap with trembling hands. He understood now. The cap wasn't about religious tradition or personal style. It was about covering, about acknowledging something greater above you, about humbling yourself beneath heaven's gaze. It was about becoming small so that God could be big. That evening, the chapel filled beyond capacity. Former inmates, city officials, reporters, and curious souls, drawn by a story too strange to be fiction, too powerful to ignore. William stood at the pulpit, Samuel's cap on his head, his father's Bible open before him. 4 years ago, he began, his voice carrying through speakers to the overflow crowd outside. An old man in a black vest and cap stood in a plaza and spoke truth to power. I was that power, and I rejected that truth. But truth is like water. It finds every crack, every weakness, every lie we tell ourselves. You can damn it, divert it, deny it, but you cannot destroy it. He paused, looking at the faces before him, broken faces, hopeful faces, skeptical faces, searching faces. Samuel Whitmore died believing that redemption is always possible, that no one is beyond grace, that God can use our worst failures for his greatest victories. He was right. I stand here as proof, a thief made treasurer of hope, a liar made speaker of truth, a prisoner made free. His voice rose, filled with a conviction that political ambition had never given him. But here's what Samuel knew that took me 4 years to learn. Freedom isn't the absence of bars. Freedom is the presence of purpose. Every person in this room has a purpose. Every broken story can become a testimony. Every fall can become a foundation for rising. An elderly, homeless man in the back row stood up. "I remember you, Senator. You had your security throw me out of a campaign event once. Said I was bad for optics." The room tensed. William nodded slowly. "I remember you too, sir. Thomas, isn't it? Thomas Brennan, Vietnam veteran, Purple Heart recipient. And yes, I had you removed. I was more concerned with appearances than people. I was wrong. I'm sorry." Thomas studied him for a long moment. "Samuel visited me too, you know, in the shelter. Told me to watch for you. Said you'd come around eventually. Old Prophet was right about that too." He extended his hand. "Welcome to the neighborhood, preacher." As William shook the veteran's weathered hand, applause erupted. Not the calculated applause of political rallies, but something raw, more real. The sound of people who understood brokenness, celebrating wholeness. Rebecca Chen's camera captured it all, but she found herself setting the device aside, tears streaming down her face. She had covered this story from the beginning, had won awards for her journalism, but somewhere along the way, the story had covered her. 3 nights later, she would knock on the chapel door, seeking what Samuel had offered and William had found. The service continued late into the evening. Stories were shared. Men who had found purpose in prison, women who had reclaimed their children from the system, families rebuilt from fragments. Each testimony carried the echo of that moment in the plaza, that collision between pride and prophecy. As the crowd finally dispersed, William stood alone in the chapel. He approached the preserved vest, touching the glass gently. "I understand now, Samuel," he whispered. "You weren't trying to destroy me. You were trying to save me. And you did." A voice from the doorway startled him. "Actually, God saved you. I just delivered the message." William spun around to find a young man, perhaps 25, standing in the doorway. The resemblance was unmistakable, the same piercing eyes, the same gentle strength. "I'm David Whitmore," the young man said. "Samuel was my grandfather. He left me a letter to give to you when you were ready. He said I'd know when that was." He handed William an envelope, worn from waiting. "He also said to tell you that your real work is just beginning." With shaking hands, William opened the letter. "William, if you're reading this, then you've become who God always intended you to be. The plaza wasn't our first meeting, son. I saw you speak at a fundraiser 7 years ago. You quoted scripture to justify taking from the poor. I knew then that God would use your fall to lift others. But here's what I didn't tell you. The night before I confronted you, I almost didn't go. I was afraid. Afraid of looking foolish, afraid of rejection, afraid of failing God. Then I remembered Moses, stuttering before Pharaoh, David, small before Goliath, Peter, walking on water until he looked at the waves. Fear is just faith pointed in the wrong direction. Now it's your turn to stand in someone else's plaza, to speak truth they don't want to hear, to offer grace they don't think they deserve. You'll want to run. Don't. You'll feel unqualified. Good. That means God can use you. One last thing. That cap I left you? My grandfather wore it when he confronted a corrupt sheriff in 1943. His grandfather wore it when he stood against slavery in 1859. It's been worn by servants and prophets, by the broken and the brave. Wear it well, until the trumpet sounds, Samuel P.S. Check your breast pocket. William reached into his jacket pocket and found a small card he didn't remember receiving. On it was written, "The next election, his words go viral." Samuel 3:16. He laughed, recognizing Samuel's humor even in mystery. There was no Samuel 3:16 in the Bible. But 1 Samuel chapter 3 verse 16 told of young Samuel being called by God, of an old priest teaching a boy to listen for heaven's voice. Election day, 2 years later. The television anchors struggled to explain what they were seeing. Exit polls showed the most unusual voting pattern in American history. Write-in candidates, former felons who had gone through the Second Chance Center program, had won 7 city council seats, 2 mayoral races, and 1 congressional district. But the real story was the new governor-elect, Rebecca Chen, the former reporter whose investigative work had become a spiritual journey. Her acceptance speech went viral within hours, not for its political promises, but for its brutal honesty. 6 years ago, I filmed an old man confronting a senator. I thought I was capturing a moment of political theater. I was actually witnessing the beginning of my own transformation. Samuel Whitmore showed us that truth spoken in love is more powerful than lies spoken in fear. William Hartfield showed us that falling isn't final if you learn to kneel. Tonight, we begin writing a new chapter, one where justice and mercy kiss, where redemption is possible, where second chances become first priorities. She paused, looking directly into the camera. To those who feel forgotten, rejected, written off, this victory is yours. To those still in prison, literal or metaphorical, hope is real. To those in power who rule through fear, love is coming, and love wins. In the Second Chance Center Chapel, William watched with 200 formerly incarcerated men and women. When Rebecca mentioned his name, they erupted in celebration. But William remained quiet, his hand resting on his father's Bible, Samuel's cap on his head. David Whitmore sat beside him. Over 2 years, the young man had become like a son to William, or perhaps a brother. Relationships forged in grace transcended normal categories. "She quoted you," David said. "That line about falling and kneeling." "She improved it," William replied. "That's what truth does. It grows, spreads, transforms. Your grandfather knew that. He planted a seed in a plaza, and look what's blooming." The chapel door opened. A man entered, expensive suit wrinkled, eyes hollow with fresh defeat. Senator Marcus Fleming had lost his race by the widest margin in state history, his corruption exposed by the same FBI unit that had arrested Hartfield 6 years earlier. "I need help," Fleming said simply. I heard you help people like me." William stood, removing Samuel's cap respectfully. "We help people who want to change, Senator. People ready to stop being who they were and start becoming who they're meant to be. It starts with admitting you're broken. Can you do that?" Fleming's composure cracked. "I'm broken. I'm completely broken." "Good," William said, extending his hand. "Broken is where God does his best work. Welcome to the Second Chance Center. Welcome to the beginning of your real life." As William led Fleming to a chair in the circle, he caught David's eye. The young man smiled, understanding passing between them. The cycle continued. Confrontation, collapse, confession, construction. What Samuel had started in a plaza had become a movement, a reformation of hearts that no election could stop, no politician could control. Outside, the city lights sparkled like stars brought to earth. Somewhere in a plaza or a boardroom or a back alley, another prophet was preparing to speak truth to power. Another proud heart was about to break. Another second chance was about to begin. The kingdom of heaven, William had learned, advanced one humbled heart at a time. And tonight, in a chapel named for an old man who dared to speak, in a center built on the ruins of pride, that kingdom grew. The news would report the election results. History would record the political shift. But heaven would remember something simpler, truer, more powerful. An old man in a black vest loved a corrupt senator enough to tell him the truth. And that truth, spoken in a plaza 6 years ago, continued to set people free.